The United States says 3 of its troops have been killed and dozens more wounded in a drone attack near a base on Jordan's border with Syria. U.S. officials say the drone struck near a barracks at the base in the Rukban region. It's the first time a strike has killed American soldiers in the area since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. President Joe Biden blamed Iran-backed militants for the attack and vowed to respond. Iran denies any involvement. DW's Washington Bureau Chief Inez Pohl has more.
Well, the killing of the 3 Americans in Jordan near the border with Syria is definitely a significant escalation of an already precarious situation in the Middle East. This is the first time, as you just mentioned, that US troops have been killed by enemy fire in the Middle East since the beginning of the Gaza war. And the prompt reaction of President Biden kind of underlines the significance of this attack. He promised to hold those responsible for the attack, I quote him, to account at a time and in a manner our choosing. And he also said, I quote him here as well, we know it was carried out by radical Iran-backed militant groups operating in Syria and Iraq. US officials have repeatedly said that they do not want to see the increasingly high tensions across the Middle East broaden into a regional war. And indeed, there have been more than 160 or so attacks on US and coalition forces in Iraq and Syria since the war started. However, until today, officials have described the constant volley of drones, rockets and missiles as unsuccessful because they have not caused serious injury or damage to infrastructure. This, of course, has changed with today. And given the increasing political pressure President Biden is facing from the Republican Party in this election year, which has just started, it indeed doesn't seem unlikely that the US will increase their military involvement. And with that, of course, comes an increasing risk that the conflict will spread throughout the whole Middle East.
Well, for more, let's bring in Marina Miron here. She's a defense analyst with King's College London. Marina, do we know who's responsible for this attack?
Good morning, Terry. Well, apparently a group called the Islamic Resistance in Iraq is responsible for this. Now, we have to understand that this is not a group per se. Rather, this is an umbrella term used for Iranian-backed militias, both in Iraq and Syria and Lebanon, for that matter. So Hezbollah could be such a group. So there is no knowledge which of the militant groups is responsible for this attack, but it is under this umbrella. So it is believed, and they did claim that the attack was conducted by them.
The Iranian government says it had nothing to do with the incident, but we know that Iran funds many of these militia groups in the region. How credible is Iran's claim of denial?
Well, it is interesting because Iran will, of course, enjoy a thin blanket of plausible deniability because it's very difficult to demonstrate whether Ayatollah or Raisi were actually ordering an attack. What is important to understand here, while these groups are being backed by Iran, they still have their own goals. Houthis, for example. So they have some common enemies like the United States in the region. However, in how far the attack has been coordinated by Iran needs to be proven. It is known that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Quds Force, has been helping these groups to coordinate attacks. So more evidence is needed in order to implicate Iran.
Talk to us a little about the U.S. presence in the region right there where this attack took place. Why are U.S. troops even stationed in Jordan near the border to Syria?
Well, we have to go back some 14 years and remember why the U.S. troops were there in the first place. And the reason was in the wake of the Syrian civil war, the U.S. troops were there to combat the Islamic State. So they are stationed not only in Jordan, which is an ally, and that's why that position was not well protected, because it's an ally country as opposed to Syria or as opposed to, say, Iraq, where there is a danger of such strikes. And therefore, we have U.S. troops across the Middle East stationed since that time. And right now, the Iraqi government has asked the U.S. to withdraw its troops from Iraq because of these ongoing attacks. So this has been going for a while now. And prior to Israel-Hamas war in October, there were incidents where these groups were attacking U.S. forces, but it has never come to casualty. And we might remember Donald Trump's response to one of them, killing in a decapitation strike the former commander of the Quds force, Qasem Soleimani. So this conflict between Iran and the United States has been developing for many years now.
Right. U.S. President Joe Biden said that the U.S. would respond to this attack. What kind of response are you expecting?
Well, there seems to be a lack of clarity in terms of how to respond. The Republicans want the U.S. to conduct strikes on the Iranian territory, and that would be the first in history. And that, indeed, in these circumstances, might lead to a broader escalation of the conflict. It is like a powder keg. However, there are other options, such as striking Iranian naval assets in the Persian Gulf and conducting, again, decapitation strikes against leaders of these militant groups under the umbrella of the Islamic resistance of Iraq. So there are these options on the table. However, the question is it going to be enough to deter both these groups and Iran from stopping the attacks? Is this deterrent credible? Another option is, of course, that can be used in conjunction are economic sanctions, but it seems like Iran has still flourished in terms of its military developments under economic sanctions. So the idea is to identify the centers of gravity in order for the strategy to work, to impose such measures that would indeed scare Iran and these groups off and prevent further attacks. And we're seeing that strikes against Houthi in Yemen, they are not making them stop. So I'm wondering which of these strategies will be chosen, or a conjunction of them, and whether they will be successful and whether it might lead to an increased deployment of U.S. troops to the region, which might widen the war.
Marina, thank you very much for your insights. That was defense analyst Marina Miron of King's College London.
Thank you for having me.